I'll show you how to install a new alternator in a 2005 Honda Pilot. Sometimes it's easier if you're watching someone install it in reverse order. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to show you the process of installing the new one, although I've already removed the old one. On this particular car, and I was reading up on some of the things, and people had the same experiences where when their alternators fail, mainly on these Honda Pilots, a lot of weird things started happening. So in our case, all our gauges went to zero. The transmission was being very weird, like it wasn't shifting or it was slipping quite a lot. You couldn't go up any hills. There was a lot of lights on the dash, check engine. The engine was pulsating, almost wanting to stall whenever you're at a stop. And all those issues came just from this alternator being bad. Probably because all your sensors, all your solenoids, like your fuel injectors, need charge. They need the battery to fuel them in order to keep working. And whenever there's not a regenerating battery, they're not able to continue functioning. So when the alternator goes, a lot of the other systems in the car go as well. Disconnect the battery, so whenever you're working with something electrical like the alternator, you don't need to worry about arcing or shorting and shocking yourself. This alternator is installed onto the accessory belt right here, in this area around right here. The bottom ear slides in between these two ears right here. It fits in and then a bolt goes through. Here's the bottom ear and the bolt that goes through. Now it's probably the hardest part of the job is fitting it down in there or taking it back out. And I removed and loosened a few things in this area. One of the things I removed was this reservoir right here, which just slides onto this dovetail and you can just pull it straight up. Same with the power steering reservoir. I just slid it up and then over, which gives me a little bit more room. I disconnected the bolt right here on this AC line, so it just has a little bit more movement in it, so I can move it around a little bit if I need to. And lastly, this plastic cover, which covers the computer, I just took off with these two clips and just wiggled it out. We'll start to wiggle the new one in. I also took off this bracket right here with a bolt, just so all these wires move a whole lot freer. This is definitely a tight fit to get it in here. We'll set this down into that groove. The bottom bolt is a 14mm. Put some anti-seize on it so it might not rust so bad. Start to tighten the bolt, but not all the way because we still need to pivot it and get the top bolt on. We'll reinstall the plug, which you just take out by grabbing both sides and pulling. And this rubber boot slides over everything. Reinstall this wiring bracket with a 12mm and snug it up. And install the main wire. And tighten it up. It's always a good idea to clean up your hardware on a wire wheel before you reinstall it. And this bolt, which is the shorter one, is for the top ear. The top ear mounts to this same bracket that the wires mount to. And tighten this one up. We can tighten this one up top all the way. And now that we had the one on the bottom loose, so it was easier to get this one, we can go ahead and tighten the one on the bottom. And I'll snug up the bottom. With everything mounted and tightened, we can go ahead and reinstall the accessory belt. Using a picture from the diagram, I'm gonna figure out how to wrap this belt back around all these different pulleys. It makes it so much easier if you just Google whatever engine you're working on, you'll be able to find a diagram for the serpentine belt. With a socket on the tensioner, I'll be able to just lift up on that tensioner, get a bunch of slack in the belt, and slip it over the pulley up top, which is the easiest to get for the last one. And I'll just make sure that I have it over all those idler pulleys. It's fully connected everywhere, and that looks good. Now we've got everything connected. Before I really button everything back together, I'm going to just test run it, make sure everything runs, make sure the alternator works before I just get everything completely done. Reconnect the battery terminal. Before I start the car, I'll check the voltage, and we're running at 13.12, so hopefully we'll be running like 14, 15 whenever the car is started. The first time that I'm going to start it, I'm just going to crank the engine over without starting it really quickly to make sure that accessory belt is lined up on all the pulleys, and then after I know that everything is seated, I'm going to start the engine. Everything looks good, so let's go ahead and start it. Now when I connect both terminals, we're running at 14.5 volts, which is really what we want to see, and that means the alternator is recharging the battery. Reinstall the computer cover, air conditioning line, These wires just clip on these metal brackets, just like that, right here, and then one back here. One thing I noticed is that right below the check engine light, there's a battery light, and that was on before and that's off. And actually I'm expecting the check engine light to stay on because there's logged faults whenever the battery was dying. If you drive it around, that should go away, or if you clear the codes, that should go away. And this is driving really good, a whole lot better than it was before, and this is normal. And that's how you replace and install a new alternator on a Honda Pilot. And these things can do some weird things when it's a bad alternator.